Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at Design in an Era, a conversation with Kasia, Walicka, Maimone, and her creative team. Of course, we're here to talk about The Gilded Age, a costume drama. It is so good to see hundreds of folks joining us today from across New York State, from Nassau County Community College, the State University of New York's Fashion Institute of Technology, to Parsons, Bronx Community College, Fordham University, Rochester Institute of Technology, Cornell, SUNY Buffalo, and many, many more. My name is Yoni Boxer. I'm the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Motion Picture and TV Development in New York State. We support and attract film and TV production to the state, serving as the liaison between New York and the film and TV industry. On behalf of Governor Hochul, Empire State Development Commissioner and CEO Hope Knight, and the whole amazing, hardworking team here at ESD, I want to welcome you all to this New York State of Film panel discussion with The Gilded Age. The governor has made it clear that film and TV industry continues to be a priority for New York State, recently leading the expansion and enhancement of the Film Tax Incentive Program, ensuring New York remains competitive in attracting and retaining productions like this one. I know many of you here today are fans of this show. The artistic masterpiece it is, the costume design, production design, amazing visual effects and locations, engaging music, witty dialogue, great acting and drama, all of these aspects make it truly amazing. What you all may not know is The Gilded Age was filmed throughout the state of New York, in New York City and beyond, on sound stages in Queens and on Long Island, in mansions, museums, historical streets and parks, in the Hudson Valley, and throughout the capital region, in Troy, Albany, Colony, and more. The production even built a custom Manhattan 61st Street, where the Russell and Van Ryn houses are. Thank you, Nassau County. You also may not know that over more than 100 days of filming in season 2 in New York, the production spent over $100 million in our local economies, at over 250 local businesses, and hired over 1,500 people. As you probably do know, the show takes place during a period of the mid-1880s, the Gilded Age, as Mark Twain coined it, was a time of immense growth in industry, technology, wealth, inequality. This amazing story and series, written and created by Julian Fellows, focuses on a certain segment of society in that Gilded Age, one with great fashion, historic fashion, and fashion and costume design are immensely important to film and TV production, to storytelling, and the costume design of all the characters in this show, both in the houses and in the servant classes, make the story come to life. Of course, that's what we're here to learn about, new careers, and to talk about clothing and fashion and costume design in film and TV production. This New York show wouldn't be possible without the great crew, artists, designers, writers, actors, directors, and many, many more. And the state, regional, and local partners and communities who are camera ready and were key to working with the production to make the show a success. And of course, to the teams at Warner Brothers Discovery and HBO for creating this show and bringing it to New York and working with us on this great panel discussion. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Holly Ryman, line producer for HBO's The Gilded Age, today's moderator. Holly is a New York-based freelance film and TV producer with over 30 years of production experience, spanning wide budgets, genres, and countries. She served as vice president of production for Marvel TV, overseeing more than 75 episodes of TV. She brings dedication and professionalism to her work and supports shows with top-tier cast and crew, ensuring that those in front of and behind the camera have a positive and collaborative space to do their best work. Thank you so much, Holly, for moderating this panel, for all you do to film in New York, and your great work.
Well, thank you so much, Yoni. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here and to help welcome our team, part of our team of costume designers that have made such an amazing 2 episodes of The Gilded Age. We have a few of them here today. So excited to introduce, first and foremost, our costume designer, Kasia Walicka Maimone. And she is like our other panelists today, I think they have all worked in film, television, and theater, and some have even done some opera. So I just want to run through a few of the wonderful titles of other projects they've worked on other than Gilded Age. Kasia has done things for HBO. I Know This Much Is True. She's done works for Wes Anderson, The Story of Henry Sugar. She worked also with him on Moonrise Kingdom. She worked on Pale Blue Eye by Scott Cooper, Quiet Place 1 and 2, Capote, Foxcatcher, Moneyball with Bennett Miller, Black Mass by Scott Cooper, Ready Player One, Bridge of Spies with Steven Spielberg, Deepwater Horizon by Peter Berg, and she's also worked with the Philip Glass operas Les Enfants Terribles and The Sound of a Voice. So, and she is fantastic to work with. We couldn't have done this without her and her leadership for both of these seasons. We have been so blessed and lucky to have her. Also joining us today, Isabel Simone.
Hello.
Is part of the amazing team of assistant costume designers. She's a New York-based designer, and aside from working with the fabulous Kasia, has worked with some other amazing designers, Anne Roth, Sandy Powell. Her credits include things such as The Greatest Showman, The Irishman, Fosse Verdon, which was Emmy nominated for Outstanding Period Costume Design, West Side Story, and The Pale Blue Eye. So we are super pleased to have you with us today, Isabel, as well. Sitting next to her is our head tailor, Sue Bakula, who led a team of folks, making everything as beautifully well fit as we did. She's been studying and working in costume since 1985, where she interned at the legendary Krause Costume Company in Cleveland, Ohio. And she worked mostly in theater until 2001 at the Great Lakes Theater Festival, and then on Broadway Caliber Costumes at Parsons Mears Limited, New York City, and the Metropolitan Opera. In 2001 is when she made her transition to movies and television, and she has been a well sought after tailor ever since. She has her BA from theater from Cleveland State University and studied media graduate level at the New School in New York City. Thank you, Sue. And last but not least, we are joined by Carolyn Spitzer. She'll be joining us. Another New York-based costume designer, originally from Miami, whose knowledge and experience revolves around period productions. Recent credits other than The Gilded Age include West Side Story, a Broadway revival of Hello, Dolly, and she's currently working as a U.S. Associate Costume Designer for Disney's Hercules in Germany. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
She holds a Master of Fine Arts degree from University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music and Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Florida International University. We are super proud to have all of them with us today. And without further ado, I think it's time to start talking about the art of design. And Kasia, this starts off with you. Tell us about your creative process. What is the first thing you do after you read the script?
So the design process starts always with the material. My job as a designer is to visualize the world presented in the material. And in this case, Julian Fellows supplies us with this incredible world of exploration of characters in New York, 1800s. And that created this incredible discovery. And so it starts from the material and figuring out who are the characters, how we're going to portray the characters, how specific are the looks for each character, how different they are from each other. But it's very tied into the worlds that they live in. So the collaboration and exploration starts with all the creative parties. It's led by the director, by the discussion with the director. In this case, Michael Engler, season 1, was the main creative visual force in creating the visual language for the series. And we spend quite a lot of time deciding how we're going to approach this period, because there are so many ways to approach period. We know that we were not making documentary. We know that we are creating a new material, a new story that has to live within the framework of the period and be very much inspired by the period, but we're choosing a very specific angle of how we're going to portray this slice of society that we get to know in Gilded Age. So our main inspiration for the lens of the visual approach were paintings. We looked at endless amount of paintings And that created very quickly this key to the door of how to approach this period, because the painters naturally heightened the beauty, heightened the contrast, heightened the colors, and we needed a language of heightened reality for our story. Then, of course, the next step is a research. Like, it's so important, and we have this amazing researcher, Susanna Gilbo, who created this library of about 36,000 images from the period. We had access to all the museums' collections of garments, which we're very lucky that that those collections exist. Almost every museum has right now digital vocabulary of all the dresses. That was incredibly important. Diving into all the fashion magazines from the period, paintings, stories. That is a base for the visual language and for creation of the source of the material. Then it moves on to creating characters. In the season 2, we already had the base of season 1 when we decided the characters, and we got to know their lives, we got to know their households. So in the season 2, it was that much easier to develop deeper language. And I feel that we all learned so much from season 1. We learned the characters, we learned the bodies of the people, we learned the worlds that they lived in. We learned also how to work with all the makers who are making the costumes. We had those shortcuts. We also knew the period much better. So in the season 2, we could go that much deeper into historical details, into emotional journey of each character. And it became this really beautiful discovery, more informed, deeper discovery. And I hope that that translates in the design process. And that process is always slightly evolving. Like, I create very fast sketches. Those sketches are inspiration of how to find the details for each of the details of each garment that needs to be created. So we dive into our library of research and create those collages and boards that inform in very, very detailed point of what is going to be the details of the sleeve, what are going to be the details of the bustles, what are going to be details of the bows. And by now we have such an incredible language with the whole team. And then it becomes that big discussion with the director of photography, with production designer, going back to the director, presenting those materials to the actors, presenting those materials to Julian. And it's this big time of discussion and visual representation. And then the most important part that starts is the moment when you start figuring out how you're going to actually execute all those ideas.
And one of the fascinating things for me, I remember even in season 1, is just coming down to the costume shop. Production floor is one above, and we'd come down here and start to see the process. And one of the things that fascinated me was even to the patterns. Like, certain characters have, like, you would do harsher lines or softer lines or swirls or certain key things that were underlying in the fabrics, which I thought was really amazing and fascinating, and sort of carried through, right? Not only just the colors, but like what types of fabrics would they wear, and what types of patterns would they wear, and things like that, which I thought was super fascinating.
Yes, I think we'll discuss it further with our team members here of all this process of creating language, individual language for each of the characters. Each of the characters called for different vocabulary, for different patterns. And in some cases we used existing fabrics, in some cases we created fabrics and recreated patterns, created new patterns. So I think that will be an interesting part of the discussion of our team who is joining us today.
Yeah, and you touched on actually a question. Some of the students from the Nassau Community College had asked similar questions like this. Does each costume start with a sketch? Who greenlights the sketch? How close is the sketch to the finished garment? And are the figures in the sketches drawn proportionally to the actors? So those are some of the specific questions they had, which you just touched upon. But it is a fascinating and beautiful part of the process.
With sketches, I think it's always an evolving process. There is the original idea. My sketches, I come from fashion background, so I was trained in fashion illustration. In season 1, we used beautiful illustrators with us who were much more precise with the proportion of the actors and the garments. I try to capture the essence of each of the characters, and capture the color that is the guidance of how we're going to proceed. But I feel it always evolves organically to the actors And but it's for sure definitely a very strong communication tool between all the parties.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to defer to any of your team now, or do you want to talk about, one of the other questions was, was there a particular character that was fun or challenging in terms of design? Was there one particular one that was sort of, did you have the most fun with, or the hardest one?
It's interesting because we always love that we have this very democratic process about creating the characters and approaching the characters. And we are so obsessed, I say we, the design team, that pretty much, I think that maybe if I could introduce that, one of the most important elements of this production is to create a team. And without this incredibly talented, incredibly experienced, and so well-informed team, those costumes would never exist.
Yeah.
And there's a few people that I have to mention who are not with us today, who are instrumental in creating this giant operation, which we'll mention how giant it was.
Very
And
giant.
it's Patrick Wiley, Dennis Andres, Rebecca Levin, Melanie Randolph, Greg Poplick, and their teams that come with them. This show would never exist without them. I mean, there were such crucial parts in creating the world of manufacturing, creating the world of organization, creating the world of beauty and the fabrics and all the pieces that we needed to create this. And also each one of them, it's a team of designers. Like, I'm surrounded by designers. Each one of them have this incredible talent, and what they bring to the table, it really is this beautiful collaborations that made this show happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can attest to that. Every single person in the department was absolutely pivotal and important and fantastic. And it's just, I've never worked with a group of people like this before as in a costume department. So I'm thrilled to some of them here today. One thing, can we take a moment to talk about Bertha?
Sure.
Okay.
I think so.
And I think we're going to show some design slides as we talk about her. Her character is so intriguing to so many fans. What types of things did you have to consider when designing her closet? Like, what distinguishes new money from old money? What are some of the elements?
Bertha for sure was definitely a fun character to design, as she's a character who breaks some rules. I mean, she's trying to belong to the society. She's desperately trying to belong in the society. At the same time, she challenges the society. So my framework was quite specific. It has to fit within the norms of the historical reality. At the same time, she's the one who draws the most from the European fashions, who is using the newest, the most exciting elements of current fashions. And I actually dove a little bit further into the period rather than the precise period of 1882. And try to make sure that her persona is so different than the old guard. For the old guard, I chose those classic jewel colors, the deep maroons, deep navies, deep jewel tones. And for Bertha, it was the colors of newness and the colors of freshness. And she had unlimited amount of money. It was new money. There was also money that had no tradition, no prior traditions. So I think that as somebody who is that adventurous and that bold and that confident, I think that I try to create a world for her that is that world that conveys that confidence and conveys that newness of fashion. And I always compare the two guards, like two museums that are here in New York, Metropolitan and Whitney Museum. They exist at the same time. We experience them both, but it's completely different collection of art.
It's amazing. Do we want to talk about logistics? Are we ready to talk about logistics?
Sure. And I think that maybe one other thing that I wanted to talk about the design is that in the show of this scale, it's always very important to measure how we're going to divide our attention between the principals and the extras. The world of extras is extraordinarily important because it creates the world for us.
Sure.
And we are so obsessed with each extra as as they are portrayed in the Gilded Age. At the same time, we strategize the details for the extras versus the principals in a bit different way, because we do know that whoever is closest to the screen is going to get the most attention to the spent on the details that are going to be very visible
And
on the camera.
what the audience might not know is that literally the vast majority of our background outfits were also created for us. Whereas another period show might be renting a lot of the background material, we actually had it made for us. In large part, you know, this type of society where we are representing, if I'm not speaking, very new, very nice, and you know, we wanted to be accurate to that sort of freshness, as opposed to perhaps costumes that may have been reused a bunch of times.
Yes,
and create a very specific look.
And there was also a lack of those periods in the costume rentals when we were starting.
Yeah. Depends on how many other period shows are going on at one time, right? You know, as we go into logistics, I just want to mention a couple numbers just because I think they're fascinating. You know, it is across 2 seasons. They built over 1,200 women's dresses, 1,000 men's suits, 750 women's hats, over 400 men's hats, 100 tiaras, and over 4,000 pairs of shoes from all over the world with manufacturers. So, you know, and you know, that coupled with the amount of time that perhaps a principal an outfit might need to take, that's a lot of logistics.
That's a lot of logistics, but I think that we cannot even start discussing this without mentioning the support that we got from you guys. That you, as a producing team, the way you supported this process was exceptional. And I think that because it is such a giant operation, that it takes a whole army of people to execute it. And we were very lucky, and I think we all love this job and root for season 3.
Thank you. And, you know, again, so how long does it take to make a dress?
I would love to hand it over to the experts here.
Okay.
I can start to how long it takes to make a dress. Should I start speaking about the logistic process a little bit in general too? So once I have a sketch from Kasia and all of the research, we have to have about 4 to 6 weeks to build one dress. So a big part of what I do with the logistics is making sure that a dress is made on the schedule for when we need it to shoot, but also that making sure that the makers that we're working with understand Kasia's vision for the dress and all of the details, and that's what we're realizing and we're all working together to produce. So Sue makes many things in-house for us, and we also have makers around New York that we work with, and we sort of approach it that there's one maker per character for the most part. So whereas maybe if Ada were a real person in 1882, she'd have a favorite dressmaker she goes to. We approach it similarly, that there's one person making her clothes, so you can see consistency through her entire closet. Once I've communicated with the shop what we need from them, it also takes about 3 fittings per dress, maybe 4, with the actor to get everything ready to be seen on camera. Once we start that process, that's when we start thinking about fabrics and start thinking about where the fabrics are going to come from and what other elements we might need to create. And that's something that Caroline can speak to.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things with this show is that we did have enough prep time in order to do custom fabrics. So, for example, a lot of the laces in the show we had custom woven to order from a vendor in France. We also sourced a lot of fabrics and materials in the city and locally. But we would have part of that 4 to 6 weeks lead time to make the dress is also the time for us to get the materials. We also custom printed and custom embroidered and developed that with Kasia as the dress was being designed.
I would love you also to speak about the shoes and all the other details of pleating and all the sourcing of fabrics and trims and buttons and the details of, that's also really interesting.
Of course. On our team, we had a really incredible shopping team that would go out into the world, into the city, and find all the sources they could find. We also reached out to companies directly overseas in Europe to send us samples and materials that Kasia could look at, the physical samples in the room, because it's not like you can just choose online from a photo of something. We also had shoes made for many of the principal actors. So they would take measurements of their feet and we would choose materials and have the shoes made. And jewelry, we had a jewelry maker who did beautiful reproduction jewelry from the period. And Kasia worked to choose all of these details that worked in to create the total look.
It's amazing. And in season 2, you had so many hats.
Yes, we didn't speak about the hats. I mean, we had a phenomenal in-house team, and we had also amazing maker in London and also fantastic makers in Rome. So it was done by so many people, and this particular season, second season, it starts from the opening of the Easter bonnets, and we knew that the whole season is going to be so driven by the volume and bigness of hats. And I definitely was encouraged after the first season to be more bold with going really after the historical research. And in historical research, we really followed the sizes of the hats, and they were enormous. And they were so big that actually at the camera test, I created a hat with our milliners that was so big. It was historically correct, but it was way too tall to fit on the screen. So we had to chop it up, and we quickly decided that it's like, it was finding that fine line of how big can we go that will fit on the screen and not overwhelm everything else. But I also think it would be fun if you talk about the process of the fittings, that from the moment when we have the fittings, the muslin, and I also would love Sue to talk about, maybe Sue, you could talk about about the garments that are created in-house. Like the example here of the dress, the girl's dress, which we see in the muslin stage and later on in full creation.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Sue. I'm called on the project the head tailor. It's a little deceptive. I mean, we're costume makers and we're costume tailors. There's a whole bunch of very brilliant master tailors that work on Savile Row in London that build a lot of suits, bespoke suits. We work with characters and build costumes for characters. And so this here is Frances. She was made in-house. A bunch of characters were made in-house, mainly the servants and this Dashiell's daughter, Frances. This dress was interesting. A bunch of people worked on this. There was a person that started it. First of all, let me just say, we had an incredible team, an incredible core team of people from all, I mean, just with decades and decades experience collectively. And from all different places, you know, fashion, academia, theater, and everyone on that team could do something from an idea from Kasia to a costume that is on a body. So this was one of the ones in house. It was started by one of our people. There were like about 6 core people in New York, 6, 7 core people. And then it switched hands, and then it like kind of evolved. And there was the one picture here towards, I don't know, I guess the finished garment. Well, okay, so this is the, you know, the first fitting. This was Erin, she started this, and there's a muslin, there's like the beginning parts of the pleated skirt, and as we can see, and you get the information from that. So Kasia like gave like a sketch or whatnot, and and we have measurement sheets. We take measurements of every actor, and then we make these things called muslins, which is just like made out of a cotton to fit the character, or fit, you know, it's the preliminary costume. It's like where we get all of our information from. And then then more of the fabric is introduced after you get this information. And like Isabel said, there's probably about 3 fittings that happen. So here's the mannequin with all the different fabrics. That lace right there, at the end of it, when it was all being put together, we had this woman that came into our team for just a couple of weeks, and she put that on. Her name was Arena, and she was a trained concert pianist, a trained classical concert pianist, and I'd never seen a trim put on so delicately as that she had done. That just pops into my head just seeing this, but yeah, I mean, it really is, it's a process. A lot of people are involved. Having said that, anyone on the team could go through the entire process on themselves. And that was really important in putting the team together, because we had limited number of spaces available for this, because our shop is really the last filter before camera also. Not only are we making garments or, you know, costumes, but all of the other costumes coming from all the other different shops or being made in other countries aren't necessarily going to fit the way that fits, let's just say. So all of that stuff comes through us as well.
There was a specific question again from some of the students at Nassau Community College fashion art class. They were asking if we use notions or that are not visible to the viewer and were not available during the time period. I think there obviously so much of this is historically accurate, but do we use some like maybe modern tricks underneath it all to make this work?
You want me to talk to this? Kasia?
Sure, please.
I mean, I would love to talk about zippers, because we ask, I think everybody wants to talk about the zippers, right?
Yeah, well, I will
Oh,
say
no.
in general, all the functional closures, like how a bodice gets on a body, those are all things that would be period accurate. There's never going to be a zipper up the back of the costume. There's never going to be some tearaway snap situation. Our amazing wardrobe team that's on set is very, very used to doing lots and lots of tiny hooks and lots of tiny buttons to get everybody into their costumes every day. And we even have some amazing period details. Like one of my favorite things that we got to do is when we made bustles in season 1, we found these amazing bustles from the period that were actually made of springs. And I was able to connect with a spring maker and have him reproduce springs, which was really interesting because he never had to do something for our purposes before. So he kept being like, how much tension does this pull? How much weight does this have to hold? And he didn't understand when I kept saying it has to hold a skirt up. There's no tension. This is not going in a machine. But it was really cool to get to recreate that, how it would have been made. And then Sue got a box of springs that she made into amazing bustles.
Yeah, and all of the nurses, they all wore those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was amazed when I saw the bustles and the wires and the springs that were really under these outfits.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, we had a collection of bustles that we were looking at, and that was the one that really made the most sense and spoke to us.
Yeah.
I also would love Isabel and Caroline talk about the shops in New York that we are working with and the makers, because we know that we worked through some of the pandemic, and all those costume shops lost the jobs for Broadway, and we were probably the only show that kept going in the first season, and we were so happy to be on this show and to help. First of all, we were thrilled to have all those shops working with us at the capacity that they were available. At the same time, it was extremely important for their survival during the pandemic. And I would love you ladies to discuss the collaborations with the shop and maybe mention a bunch of the embroiderers and the shops, because I think it's very important to the industry in New York City. It's really important to make sure that we have this infrastructure in New York for us to be able to do those jobs.
Yeah, I can start with that and say we work with an amazing collection of costume shops just to name a few, Tricorn, Eric Winterling, Barrick, and many, many others. But they are most of them are local to the garment district. And they have tons of experience making clothes for Broadway and film and TV. And we work really, really closely with them. And it was amazing during the pandemic that we were able to keep them going, because they really, really struggled without Broadway not being, one of their main sources of income. But they're amazing makers, and Caroline also works closely with them. So I'll let her mention a couple too.
Yeah, we also worked with a lot of vendors that did sort of the fabric modification. So Dynamics is one of the printers we worked with, and Sky NYC, and New York Embroidery Studio did most of our embroidery and embellishment work. We also worked with LaDuca Shoes, who did a lot of custom shoes, because the reality is you can't buy shoes for this period at Macy's. So we did have to either make or rent all the shoes for the production. Yeah, and endless, every fabric store, B&J Fabrics, New York Elegant, Mood, every fabric store, something for this show came from, pretty much.
Flower makers.
Well, now just real quickly, unless there's more we want to talk about this before we get on to career advice and things like that for our young students, just in sort of the sheer volume of what you guys accomplished, I have my own vote for the answer to this question, but what do you think were some of the greatest challenges of accomplishing all of that? I mean, the sheer schedule of tracking what outfit comes when certainly had to be among the highest of those issues, yeah?
I think it's like a beehive.
Yeah.
It is such a incredibly intricate operation. We are so interconnected, and the schedules that are provided by the production, by the needs of the production, the schedules of the actors. Also in the second season, we did have a lot of COVID cases, which
we didn't have any COVID cases season 1 in our actor community, but season 2, people started to have lives again, and therefore we're starting to get COVID. Their kids were going back to school, and it just started to happen. And we also, which may not be public knowledge, is we shot a lot of stuff out of order on the show for a multitude of reasons, locations, actor availability, etc. So that we were sort of all over the place. It isn't a very linear schedule. So it was more about, when does this dress play? When does this outfit play? And, unlike a contemporary show, we in production would have to run to costumes and say, we want to pull this scene up because our actor is out and we need something to shoot. Will the clothes be ready? And sometimes the answer was no, and we had to figure out what else to do. I mean, they did their best and they did an amazing job, but it was a bigger element because of COVID, because of the schedule changes, because of the manufacturing process, and it was a constant collaboration and panic, I'm sure.
we somehow also we create design boards for each character, and then we create the design boards for each character with another character in the scene. So we continuously, it's like this continuous dance of factors and elements and how things work together. It's highly strategized and highly planned. So when there is a schedule change, all the wheels have to change for all the planning. But this team has done incredibly well. We're so used to this high speed, high pressure. And I think we really love the job. So I think that would be my personal advice. Like, look for what you love and follow the love, and then it all opens up.
Well, I think that's a good segue into advice. I'd love to go around this sort of group and tell us about your first job in the film industry. How did you get your foot in the door? And would you do anything differently, knowing what you know today, as far as getting into the business? Kasia, do you want to start, or do you want to start with?
I would love, Caroline wanted to start. Please.
Oh, sure, Caroline.
Oh, my favorite advice to give that I was given that I really, really cherish was, I was not at the time not in New York, so this is particularly important for people who aren't if you're not in the city proper, is to reach out to your local film commission. That's the connection point for all the productions happening in your area. Send them your resume, introduce yourselves, make a contact there, tell them what you're interested, what department you're interested in working, and when productions come to your area, that film office is who the productions go to look for local hires. So that's where you can get your foot in the door as a PA. That was how I got my first job, was just sending a cold email, and then the rest is just connection building from there. But that's definitely the first step, is connect with your local film office in your
Did you
city or
do
town.
Caroline? Was it in Miami or?
It was in Cincinnati, Ohio, actually. Yeah.
Sue, Isabel, do you guys want to talk about it? Advice? First job.
Yeah, a piece of advice that I always give that sometimes sounds silly, but I think it's so important, is to always be friendly and kind and frankly pleasant to work with. My first job that I ever did in film, I was connected through friends, and it was actually a movie that was shut down after 2 months and was never made. So it was kind of a crazy, chaotic process. It wasn't the most pleasant job, but because I was a PA that was up for anything, and I was friendly and willing to help out as this movie was falling apart, the people I met on that movie wound up hiring me for things down the line. And I still work with those people. And I think in our industry, you never know who's going to be the person who says to somebody, I know a great PA, I know a great shopper, I know a great costume designer. So it's important to just be friends with people and be friendly and open, and never close the door, because you don't know which door is going to be the one you want to go through.
I would love to interject really quickly and just say to that point that Isabel and I have been working together off and on for 8 years now on a whole variety of projects. And so those relationships you build are so important.
I second that.
I would also advise for the people who are starting, it's not easy to start on big productions, because when we are all members of union. When you're starting, it's very difficult to become member of a union, and you need to have a serious training before you can be admitted to the union. We are also advocating with our unions very much for creating a trainee programs, and that's something we're working with the unions with. So a lot of the times the people that we get are starting at very starting positions, which are production assistants. And we know that very often we get highly overqualified people. But at the same time, you need to have patience and know that as a production assistant, you will be given tasks that are beyond your training and what you learned in school, but you need to have patience and you need to observe and just watch the world around you and build the time that you need into creating the experience. I personally started from fashion, and I designed the first movie for my neighbor who was doing a short film and maxed out his credit cards. And I was a driver, I was doing catering, I designed costumes, and I did production design. And that movie was submitted to Sundance Festival, and he got his first, and he got admitted to the development of scripts, and he got his first feature through Sundance, and I designed that first feature. So I say connect with the people around you, talk to the people around you who love the same thing that you love, and it just, the paths open up, and they open up. And then I started working in theater also by asking a friend of mine who was a sculptor who was working at the public theater, and I said, please introduce me to the costume designer. And he did, and I was hired, and I worked for a few months as the Gabriel Barry's assistant. And then one of the actors who was in the play asked me to design his show, and I designed maybe 200 plays at probably for $100, $250 design fees. But that was my school of costume design, and then it led to bigger jobs.
Right. Yeah, I think it's saying open to opportunity and really sort of reaching out to different, like you said, to film commissions, or to, when I started, I just sent my resume to every address I could find of a show in pre-production and offered to intern or offered to do whatever. And it worked out. Eventually somebody asked me, but I didn't know how to get into the business. I had no clue. So I just really just cold calling and pushing and being friendly, as Isabel said, and working hard and being on time and being reliable. And over time, those relationships build on each other, and we all talk to one another. And so as you build your reputation in the business, you know, your work ethic will speak for itself. You know, and people will get to know you and people will try to give you opportunities. And if it's something you really want to be clear about what you want to do, if you're really into to costumes, then, you know, then you should pursue it. You should, if you love it, it's the opportunities are there. It's just they're a little harder to find than maybe in corporate America, but it's particularly New York is a great place. There's a lot of production happening, so more and more opportunities all the time. So it's an amazing world we live in. Did Sue want to speak to that or?
Oh, to,
Did you transition
so,
over? You
I'll
spoke
do what I do. So, you know, I have to say, you know, speaking about the public, I saw Pirates of Penzance in New York City when I was like 11 years old. And it knocked my socks off. So I knew I was gonna work in the theater somehow. So, you know, I kind of, you know, it's like what you guys are saying, it's like persistence, making one choice that leads to the next. Like in high school, I did a internship at a costume house. Then I worked in regional theater. You know, I didn't get to New York until like, you know, 6, 7, 8 years after that. So, you know, it really was doing the hard work, like really showing up, like Holly says, showing up on time, doing the hard work, saying yes to things that, you know, you might not want to do, or, you know, you feel you aren't qualified to do yet, but you'd be surprised, you know, you might be very good at it. So, yeah, and then one thing led to another, you know, and then transitioning into film, you know, it was just the natural, because you can't really learn what I do in film school. So you kind of have to learn it somewhere else, but it's possible. People do it all the time.
Awesome. Well, I don't know. Do we, is it time to move on to questions?
Yes,
I don't know.
we do have a few questions coming in from the audience. So, you know, we've spoken a lot about the dresses, but we have a question about Oscar and his hat choices. Can you share some of the choices that were made regarding Oscar and his character and what hats were chosen for him?
Oscar was developed in the first season, established as this character that we know so well and is so intricate and so specifically slightly different than all the other businessmen around him. And in the second season, Patrick Wiley developed a lot of new ideas for Oscar and played with this, and it all was driven by research and imagery from that period, and it was driven very much by finding characters who are stepping outside of the world of business, which most of our men in the season 1 were functioning within the world of business, unless they were also the characters that we see on the streets. This year, our characters are more in social situations, which also open up the vocabulary of their wear of their costumes to different circumstances. And Oscar is definitely that character that draws more attention to his own individual style, which was very much supported by Patrick Wiley, who contributed tremendously to the menswear this season.
And then Karen asks, was there a special film you remember as a child watching that inspired you to design?
I would love everybody to say something, but for me, yes, it was Hair. That movie. I love that movie so much. That movie is responsible for me coming to the United States for sure. And it was, that was definitely a movie that opened up my eyes to the whole process of design. I also very much was influenced by theater and operas and art world. I'm very much inspired by contemporary art and classical art. I spend a lot of time in the museums, and I think it's a combination of the visual worlds around me. Ladies?
For me, it's sort of like Kasia's. My movie that inspired me to pursue this as a career is very different from the Gilded Age and being in this period world, but it was Hedwig and the Angry Inch. That was the first movie I saw, and I really thought that looks like what I want to do. I want to be able to make something that looks like that and be part of a team that makes something this whole wild world.
It was the genius Arian Phillips who designed that.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, like I said before, I saw, in New York City in 1980, Pirates of Penzance, I went there with family friends. I was staying in the city. I was from Cleveland, Ohio, and it blew my world apart. I mean, just even being in New York City at that time. But, just the magic of, standing in line, in Central Park and getting the tickets to seeing the production and, all of it, that was definitely a point in my life that I started making choices to get to the place where I am today.
I would say for me, I grew up watching all the big famous movie musicals, which sort of led to the start of my career in musical theater, but Singing in the Rain and West Side Story and all of those, the classics.
That's great. Oh, well, I'm not a designer, but I, for a heartbeat, wanted to become a director of photography when I first started in the business. In part, the movie that made me want that was The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover,
Oh my God, that's so
which
good.
was a beautiful visual medium that made your brain get confused about how to think about visual medium. And I just fell in love with it. And that's kind of what I have the poster framed in my house because and if I ever get lost about why I'm doing what I'm doing, I look at it and I remember that that's what inspired me to get into this business.
That's
From theater.
amazing.
into the part of it.
And is there another period you would love to design for next?
You've done many of
I've
them.
done
You've
many.
done all of them.
I've done many of the periods. I always feel that it's not period draw, it's the story draw. It's the world that we get to experience, because as a costume designers, we experience a form of anthropology. We dive so deep into the research, into the worlds that we need to represent. And that's the most fun part of the process, that discovery of the world. I mean, for us being New Yorkers and living in New York and getting to know this time in New York in the time of the Gilded Age in detail, intimately, and then we got to roam around all those incredible sets, incredible mansions. That's what's the draw of the material. So I've done so many. I know so much too much about Whitey Bulger doing Black Mass. Like, I've done so many discoveries of different worlds. I would say I don't have a favorite period, but I do love working on Gilded Age. It's magical. That period is magical.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is amazing. It's from the servants' wear, from the streets, from the workers to the high society and the variation. It's
creating a world that doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore, and a very specific part of a world that doesn't exist anymore. And it's a real joy and excitement, for me to walk in, to see these sets, to see these costumes, to build this special. And to be honest with you, not to divert too much, but when we would go to these mansions and we would shoot in them, they're basically museums. And when we had the ball season 1, and I would say the people who worked at these mansions were just, their mouths were agape. They got to see these ballrooms, usually with ropes off of them, being used in the way that they're intended, and the things that they talk about all the time. And so we brought that to life back to them. And that was a really nice, special moment to see sort of the joy it would bring to the people whose lives talk about history but never see it reenacted,
Well, thank you all so much for your time today. We are unfortunately out of time to answer more questions, but we will hand it back to Yoni now.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and the whole team. This was such a fascinating discussion. I know I learned so much. As Holly was talking about the hundreds and thousands of pieces of materials, I was just imagining them all in one of those rooms together. What an amazing conversation. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Kasia. Thank you, Isabel, Caroline, and Sue, the whole Warner Brothers, Discovery, HBO Productions team, Daphne, Maggie, Jay, Uni, Kelly, David, Michelle, Michael, and many, many more, and our team here at ESD, Laura and Sky, Shaylin, Mason, and many others. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here. Check out our website for information on filming in New York and other webinars about film production, and we wish everyone a good holiday season.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.